4 days before the world tilted, Keanu Reeves sat in his Los Angeles loft, the morning light spilling through a cracked window, casting jagged shadows across the hardwood floor. The air carried the faint scent of coffee and worn leather. Emma Johnson, his assistant, 30, sharp-eyed and fiercely loyal, stood by a cluttered desk, her tablet glowing with an email from The View. Her voice was tight, laced with suspicion. "This is a trap, Keanu," Emma said, tapping the screen. "A thoughtful discussion on generational values in America. It's a setup. Whoopi Goldberg's been carving up guests for 20 years. They're fishing for a viral clip, something to make you snap on live TV." Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Keanu, 60, leaned back in a faded armchair, his black blazer slung over its arm. His gray tee shifted as he touched the simple cross necklace at his chest, a gesture born of years carrying grief. His eyes, weathered but warm, met hers. A faint smile softened his face, though it held an edge of resolve. "Then I won't snap," he said, voice low, steady like a river carving stone. "I'll give them something real." Emma paused, her skepticism wavering. Keanu's fingers lingered on the cross, his gaze drifting to a creased photo on the desk, a young woman, smiling, frozen in time. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Sometimes, you walk into a storm not to fight it, but to show it can't break you." Emma nodded, trusting despite her doubts. The weight of his words settled over the room, a quiet vow of what was to come. The studio of The View thrummed with artificial energy on the morning of the broadcast. Harsh lights bathed the vibrant set, where an audience, young dreamers, weary skeptics, hopeful elders, sat in restless anticipation. The iconic round table gleamed, flanked by 4 hosts, led by Whoopi Goldberg, 70, her commanding presence sharpened by decades of wit and calculated charm. Cameras glided silently, their lenses hungry for every angle. The air crackled, heavy with unspoken tension, like a sky bruised with thunder. Backstage, Keanu adjusted his blazer, the cross necklace glinting under fluorescent lights. Noah Harris, a 20-year-old production assistant, nervous but awestruck, whispered, "They're expecting fireworks today." "Mr. Reeves, the producers are buzzing." Keanu's smile was gentle, disarming. "Let's give them light instead," he said, his voice a quiet anchor. In the control room, David Lee, 50, a grizzled executive producer, leaned toward a monitor, his voice low. "This guy's too calm," he muttered to Sarah Mitchell, 40, a producer with a knack for spotting viral moments. "If Whoopi pushes hard, we'll get gold or a disaster." Sarah smirked, her eyes glinting. "Either way, we win." As Keanu stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause, a wave of sound that felt more curious than warm. He shook hands with the host, Joy, Sunny, and Sarah, his smile genuine but reserved. Whoopi's grin was wide, a showbiz mask honed to perfection. But her eyes gleamed with calculation, sizing him up like a boxer before a bout. The other hosts exchanged glances, sensing the undercurrent, their smiles tight. Keanu took his seat, the lights tightening on the round table, casting long, stark shadows. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice light but edged, a blade wrapped in velvet. "So, Keanu, still rocking that cross necklace? I figured the Matrix would have made you a bit more enlightened." The audience chuckled, but the laugh was uneasy. Sensing the jab, Keanu didn't flinch. His fingers grazed the cross, his voice steady, soft, cutting through the noise like a prayer in a storm. "I wear it because it reminds me there's something bigger than fame," he said. "Bigger than me." A few audience members clapped softly. Linda Thompson, 60, in the back row, leaned forward, Her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled, her eyes already glistening with unspoken grief. Whoopi tilted her head, her smile thinning, a predator testing her prey. But with all the chaos out there, war, division, despair, don't you think it's time we left those old myths behind? She pressed, her tone sharp, daring him to falter. The room stilled. The air grew electric, sharp enough to taste like ozone before lightning. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers, calm but unyielding. A lighthouse standing firm against a gale. The world doesn't need fewer beliefs. Whoopi, he said. It needs better ones. A gasp rippled through the audience. James Carter, 50, in the third row, grizzled and weathered, whispered, "Whoa." His voice caught by a mic, echoing faintly. Backstage, Mike Davis, 35, a wiry camera tech, mouth to a colleague. He's turning the room. Whoopi's smile faltered, a crack in her armor. Her knuckles whitened around her note cards, the paper crinkling audibly. The other host shifted, uncomfortable. As the power dynamic tilted, a tide pulling toward Keanu. He remained still, unshaken, a quiet force that seemed to draw the room into his orbit. "Well, you came loaded with philosophy today, didn't you?" Whoopi said, forcing a laugh, her voice tight, betraying a flicker of unease. The audience chuckled weakly, but the energy had shifted, the room no longer hers. Keanu tilted his head, his voice softer now, slicing deeper, each word deliberate. "Not philosophy," he said. "Experience." Whoopi flipped through her cards, her movements sharp, desperate to regain control. Her tone hardened, a calculated strike meant to draw blood. "You've played heroes, rebels, a cyber messiah. How much of that's just acting? When does the actor start thinking he's the savior?" The room flinched, the question hanging like a guillotine. Keanu waited, letting it linger, his eyes steady, piercing, as if seeing through her to the heart of the moment. "None of it," he said. "But the day I stopped pretending I was invincible was the day I found strength." Whoopi blinked, caught off guard, her rhythm disrupted. The audience sat in silence, hanging on his words, their breaths shallow. She pressed harder, her patience fraying, her voice rising. "So, what? You're here to school us. You think that little cross makes you better than the rest of us?" Keanu's expression didn't waver. His voice was low, deliberate, a blade wrapped in compassion. "No, it reminds me I'm no better than anyone, and no worse. It's not armor, it's a mirror." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A wave of recognition. Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders trembling. Whoopi reached for a non-existent water glass, her composure cracking like brittle glass. Sarah scrambled, tripping over a cable in her haste to deliver one, her footsteps echoing backstage. In the control room, David muttered, "We're losing the pacing. This is spiraling." Trying to pivot, Whoopi grabbed her next card, her voice sharp, a lifeline she clung to. "So, explain this. You're spiritual, but you've worked in an industry full of vanity, excess, abuse. How do you reconcile that?" Keanu took a breath, his gaze steady, unflinching. "You mean, how do I live in darkness and still light a candle? Because if you only shine where it's safe, that's not light, that's performance." Karen Walker, in the front row, stood slowly, her nod heavy with unspoken burdens. A mother, a survivor, carrying invisible scars. Her silent gesture sent a ripple through the crowd, a tide of empathy swelling. Whoopi tried to laugh it off, her voice too high, brittle, like a string about to snap. "So now we're all doing church, huh?" The line fell flat, thudding against the tension. A misstep that echoed. Keanu reached into his jacket, pulling out a faded, creased photo, its edges worn from years of touch. He held it gently, his voice barely above a whisper, trembling with restrained emotion. each word a wound laid bare. "This was my sister," he said. "She taught me to pray before I knew what I was praying for. She passed when I was still lost, still drowning in anger and emptiness. But she believed in me when I didn't." He touched the cross again, not for show, but for her, his eyes glistening, holding back a tide of grief. The room broke into a silence so heavy it felt alive, a living thing pressing against the walls, suffocating the artificiality of the set. Whoopi's cards trembled in her hands, her fingers betraying her. A tear glinted in her eye, quickly blinked away. But the camera caught it, zooming in on her vulnerability, broadcasting it to millions. "That's a touching story," Whoopi said, her voice tight. Sarcasm barely viogens her unease. "A shield that was crumbling. But let's be real. You're a Hollywood actor. You make millions. You fly private. What makes you think you can speak for anyone who's actually struggling?" Keanu's gaze didn't waver. His voice was soft, but it cut like steel, forged in pain. "Because I've struggled. I've slept in cars. I've lost the people I love most. You think money makes you immune to pain? Then you've never lost something that can't be replaced." The audience murmured, a wave of empathy swelling, their faces reflecting their own unspoken losses. Whoopi shifted, her confidence cracking like thin ice underfoot. She tried one last jab, her laugh forced, hollow, a desperate grasp at control. "So now you're the spokesperson for morality, for suffering. You're going to save us all with a sad story and a necklace." Keanu leaned back, not in retreat, but in command, his presence filling the room. "I'm not here to save anyone," he said. "I'm here because someone watching needs to know they're not alone." He turned to the camera, his voice steady, eyes piercing the lens as if seeing into every living room, every heart. "If you've ever been talked down to, laughed at, told you're too old-fashioned, too sensitive, too spiritual, if you've ever felt small for believing in something bigger, this moment is for you." A young man, Ethan Wilson, 20, stood in the audience, his voice trembling, cutting through the silence like a beacon. "I used to believe, but the world told me it was stupid. Watching you, it makes me want to try again." The studio froze, time itself seeming to pause. Whoopi's hands shook, her cards forgotten, scattered on the table. She muttered, "Let's take a break." But the director didn't cut, the red light on the camera unyielding. The moment was too raw, too electric, a live wire sparking across the airwaves. Keanu nodded to Ethan, his voice gentle, a lifeline thrown across the void. "Don't let the world tell you who you are. Let your actions speak louder." A screen overlay flashed, unplanned, a pre-submitted viewer message from Emily Clark, 16. "I'm struggling with depression. If you're talking about hope, please don't make it a joke." The timing was devastating, eerie, as if fate had scripted it. The audience murmured, some wiping tears, others bowing their heads. Robert Evans, 70, in the second row, whispered to his wife, "Susan, this isn't a talk show anymore. It's something holy." Whoopi's voice cracked, her control slipping like sand through her fingers. "Well, this show took a turn." Keanu shook his head, his tone firm but kind, a quiet rebuke. "It didn't take a turn. It arrived where it needed to go. We avoid real conversations so much that when one happens, we act like it's a mistake." He stood slowly, not in protest, but to reclaim his space, his presence a quiet command. The audience rose, row by row, in silent reverence, no applause, just respect, a standing ovation born of awe, the kind reserved for funerals and revolutions. Whoopi sat, her note cards a scattered wreckage, her throne crumbling beneath her. Desperate, Whoopi snapped, her tone less playful, more defensive, a cornered animal baring its teeth. "So now you're the voice of wisdom. You think you get to talk down to us because you've got a sob story and a necklace?" Keanu's voice was soft, like calm water over jagged rocks, unyielding yet compassionate. I don't think I'm above anyone. But there's a sickness in our culture when compassion is mocked and faith is treated like a punchline. Whoopi smirked, but it was hollow, her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. Or maybe some of us are tired of being told we're broken because we don't believe in the same fairy tales. A gasp rippled through the crowd, sharp and collective. Sarah looked away, uncomfortable, her notepad a sudden refuge. Keanu brushed his cross, his voice quieter now, heavier, trembling with the weight of memory. Each word a step through a graveyard. You call it a fairy tale. But to me, it was the only thing I had when the world broke me. It didn't fix everything, but it gave me something to hold on to when nothing else would. He turned to the audience, his voice raw, unshakable, a beacon in the dark. Some of you have lost more than I ever have. Some of you are holding on by a thread. If all you have is belief, hold it tight. Don't let this world shame you for having hope. Noah Harris, the young staffer, stepped into the frame, bold, unscripted, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. He's right, he said. I grew up watching this show, but I've never seen anyone this honest on this stage. Whoopi snapped, "Excuse me," her voice sharp, but Noah didn't back down. His defiance a spark in the tinder. The crowd murmured, a tide turning, their faces alight with realization. Sarah Mitchell, the producer, broke protocol, striding onto the stage with the phone, her face pale. "You need to see this," she whispered, handing it to Keanu, her voice barely audible over the mic. The screen displayed a tweet, already viral, its words searing. "I was about to end my life today. Then I watched Keanu Reeves talk about pain and belief. I'm still here. Thank you." Gasps filled the room, a collective intake of breath. Whoopi's hand dropped to her lap, her face ashen, her mask shattered. The audience no longer saw a celebrity, they saw a lifeline. A man who had walked through fire and emerged not to preach, but to witness. Keanu handed the phone back, his voice quiet but resolute. A vow etched in stone. If all I did today was remind someone that pain doesn't make them broken, it was worth it. "Whoopi!" Her voice raw, tried to speak, her words faltering. "You said something earlier about people needing to feel seen. I think I forgot how to do that." Keanu looked at her, not with triumph, but with sadness, his eyes holding hers with a gentleness that cut deeper than anger. "We all forget," he said, "but we can remember." A tear slipped down Whoopi's cheek, unscripted, unguarded, a crack in the facade she'd built over decades. She wiped it away, her voice barely a whisper, trembling with vulnerability. "You've got people crying in here." "Reeves, that's not supposed to happen at 10 in the morning." A few chuckled softly, a release of tension, a collective exhale. Keanu nodded, his voice soft. A quiet truth. Sometimes it takes one person to stop performing so everyone else can breathe. Whoopi turned to the camera, dropping her persona entirely, her voice trembling. Raw, human. If you're watching, and you've ever felt like your faith, your grief, your quiet strength made you an outsider, maybe we've been laughing at the wrong things. The camera lingered, unflinching, capturing a moment too real to interrupt. From her earpiece, David's voice hissed, "Wrap it," but Whoopi ignored it. Her eyes locked on Keanu, her voice thick with honesty. "Thank you, not for coming on the show, but for not becoming who they wanted you to be." Keanu's faint smile held 1,000 unspoken things, a flicker of light in the storm. "They invited me, but I showed up as me." He turned to the audience one last time, his voice steady, a clarion call. We've built a culture where mocking people is a sport, but what if the bravest thing we can do is care? If this made you feel something, don't scroll past it. Share it. Start a conversation not about me, about what matters. The screen faded to black, not with music or applause, but with a still image. Keanu standing, head bowed, cross visible against his chest. A caption read, "Sometimes the quietest man in the room has the loudest truth."
네,
The internet ignited like a wildfire, untamed and unstoppable. Within minutes, clips flooded Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, each frame dissected, each word a spark. Did Whoopi just get humbled on her own show? And gave way to a deeper question, raw and urgent. Why does this hit so hard? Oh, Keanu hadn't delivered a monologue, he'd held up a mirror. And the world saw its own fractures reflected back. Unable to look away, backstage, Whoopi sat in her dressing room, silent, staring into her vanity mirror. The bulbs framing her face like a halo, she no longer felt she deserved. The makeup crew had retreated, the producers whispering down the hall, their voices a distant hum. She wasn't angry, wasn't embarrassed, just quiet. A stillness foreign to a woman who'd built a career on words. She whispered to her reflection, maybe it's time I listen more. Keanu, in a dimly lit hallway, sipped coffee from a paper cup, sitting on a folding chair, unbothered by the chaos swirling around him. He'd declined a private room, a security escort, any trace of celebrity privilege. Emma scrolled through messages pouring in, her voice soft with awe. A veteran wrote of feelings seen for the first time in years. A teenager, reclaiming faith, shared a story of quiet courage. A single mother typed, finally, someone who speaks without shouting. Rachel Adams, a pastor's widow in Georgia, sent a message that stopped Emma cold. I was on the brink of giving up after my husband's death. You reminded me I don't need to be loud to be strong. Keanu read it, his fingers tightening around the cup, his eyes distant. He closed the message, staring at the floor, the weight of her words settling into him like a stone. News outlets scrambled, their headlines a cacophony. Conservative media hailed it as moral courage. Liberal outlets, cautious but moved, admitted something undeniably human had transpired. Churches across the country requested the footage for Sunday services, calling it a sermon in disguise. A rival network offered Keanu his own show, an open platform to revive meaningful discourse, but he declined with a shake of his head. It wasn't content, he told Emma, his voice firm. It was a moment. You can't package that. That evening, Keanu walked through a growing crowd outside the studio, their signs a patchwork of gratitude. Faith still matters. You spoke for us. He didn't wave like a politician or pose for cameras. He stopped every few steps, listening, seeing each person, not just looking, but truly seeing. A young woman, tears streaking her face, clutched his hand, whispering, "Thank you for making hope feel real again." He nodded, his eyes holding hers, a silent promise. As he slid into his car, the city lights shimmered beyond the window, a canvas of exhaustion and hope. He leaned back, the cross cool against his chest, Rachel's message echoing in his mind. The next morning, The View issued a statement, not an apology, but a pledge to create space for voices like Keanu's, a tacit admission that something had shifted. Whoopi remained silent, not out of pride, but because some lessons demand stillness, a pause to let the truth settle. And for those who watched, who listened, who felt, Keanu's words became lanterns in the dark, not because he was perfect, not because he won, but because in a world drowning in noise, he spoke only what mattered. And that was louder than anything. The story of Keanu Reeves on The View isn't just a moment of television history. It's a blueprint for living with the authenticity in a world that often rewards noise over substance. Here's how you can apply its lessons to your life. Drawing from Keanu's quiet strength and the emotional truths that unfolded. First, embrace your truth, even when it's mocked. Keanu wore his cross necklace unapologetically, despite Whoopi's jabs, because it anchored him to something deeper, his sister's memory. His resilience. Identify what grounds you, whether it's faith, a personal value, or a cherished memory. Hold it close, not as a shield, but as a mirror, reflecting who you are. When others challenge or dismiss it, respond with calm conviction, not defensiveness. Your steadiness will speak louder than their skepticism. Second, choose presence over performance. Keanu didn't shout or grandstand, he spoke from experience. His words raw and real. In your own life, resist the pressure to perform for approval, whether on social media or in conversations. Share your story authentically, even if it's messy or quiet. When you're genuine, you create space for others to do the same, just as Keanu's honesty inspired Ethan to stand and speak. Third, listen to the silenced voices, including your own. The audience's reactions, Linda's tears, Karen's nod, showed how Keanu's words reached those who felt unseen. Seek out the overlooked in your community, whether it's a struggling friend or a stranger with a story. And don't ignore your own inner voice when it whispers hope or pain. Like the viral tweet that stopped the studio cold, one moment of listening can change everything. Finally, turn pain into purpose. Keanu's grief over his sister didn't break him. It fueled his compassion, his drive to remind others they're not alone. Your hardships, however heavy, can become lanterns for others. Share your lessons, not to preach, but to connect. Start small, a kind word, a shared story, and watch it ripple. Just as Keanu's moment sparked a cultural shift. In a world that thrives on outrage, be the calm in the storm. Speak what matters, not what's loud. Care fiercely, even when it's risky. And when you feel small, remember Keanu's words. Your belief, your hope, is worth holding it tight. If this story and its lessons resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about living with purpose and authenticity. Your support helps us keep sharing these powerful messages. Let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments. How will you carry this stillness into your life? See you in the next video, and have a beautiful day.